Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies once again with a quick question and answer video. Today we're going to talk about IP source guard. Why should you use it? What is it, used to mitigate? Or that's basically why would you use it anyway? What are the prereqs that you need before you actually implement this? And uh, it's going to be a little bit of background information on this. So let's go to the whiteboard here. I like to start with the titles here. So we're just going to do IP source guard. Now, what source guard is a technique to mitigate IP spoofing. Okay. So this is different from the other flavor, which is DAI, dynamic ARP inspection, which is meant to stop MAC spoofing. All right. So this works off of one overarching element, which is overarching element DHCP snooping. All right. So those two technologies, DAI and IP source guard, rely on the DHCP snooping database to actually do its mechanism or do its function. So since we're talking about IP source guard and we're mainly talking about IP spoofing, I will do a video on DAI. Again, DAI, you got to be very careful about that because you could cause a problem. And with DAI, you may have to do this thing called MAC addressless, or MAC ACLs, basically, um, to permit certain MAC addresses from certain ports if you do not do something like trusting the upstream port, right? So you got to be careful with that. But how IP source guard works is it will, let's say we have the DHCP snooping database. So this is DHCP snooping database, DBase. So what happens is this is in a switch and you have some users plugging in to the switch. So UNDs, I'll just say usernames and devices, user devices, username and device, or user and devices. And then we have the access switch here, access switch, which has the function of the DHCP snooping database in it. So we're just going to have that as one switch, right? So what ends up happening, and we'll have like shared services off to the side here. Let's just say DHCP servers over here. All right. So what happens is when you put on IP spoofing or IP source guard, every port here is basically untrusted, just like DHCP snooping, but this will also prevent traffic other than DHCP from being allowed on that port. Then when you get a DHCP address, it will, let's put this in green here, it will record the IP, MAC, and port that that address is a part of. And what will happen is it will say, okay, I know that on this port here, we'll just use a typical RFC 19 address. We have 192, 168, let's say 12, right? This one is .3 and this one is .4. So what it will say is, I know that the IP address 192.168.1.2 is on this port here, based on the entry that I have in the DHCP snooping database. If malicious bad guy comes in, plugs in, and they try to take over .2, it will deny this traffic because it will say, wait a minute, you're saying you're .2, but I know .2 is actually on this port. So this is actually someone trying to spoof the MAC address of this actual real machine that got on the network. So this prevents it. Source guard prevents it from happening, and then that kicks this guy off the network, or it will just drop the traffic because it knows from the DHCP snooping database that that IP address should not be seen on this port here. It should be seen on this port here, which, based on the IP DCP snooping database, that should correlate and be correct. Now, this brings into another issue here. If you're allowing somebody to just plug into your network and just get DHCP. That's the first problem. This should be handled by network access control, aka I'm going to say ICE because that's what I was classically trained on. So we're going to say ICE in particular for the network access control appliance that you're going to use. Why is that? Because if a bad person, let's say BG, came in and plugged into your network, well, if you're using certificate-based authentication, which you should, if you want more information about that, check out the playlist on my channel. You'll get a whole bunch of information about ICE and, best practices per the situation, because you know how I feel about best practices. Best practices are based on what you're doing. There's general ones, but it's really situation-based stuff. Because you can do things that are not best practice for your situation because your network is different. Everybody's network's not the same. But back to this whole NAC situation, you should have NAC implemented in your network because this authentication, authorization, and accountability or accounting. Um, if you have that in place, you really kind of don't have to worry about IP source guard or dynamic ARP inspection. You don't really have to worry too much about that stuff. Now, DHCP snooping, you still have to worry about because that's going to stop people from plugging in rogue DHCP servers. Here's the thing, though. If you're authenticating every port, you kind of don't need any of this, right? Because if someone plugs a rogue device into your network, they should probably be denied off the network or not even given access to the network. So do you really need to worry about DHCP snooping? If someone were to plug a DHCP server in a non-802.1x port, meaning they're in your data center, you have a way bigger problem than logical configurations. You have a physical security problem. Because how is somebody that you don't know able to get into your rack and plug in a rogue DHCP server? So a lot of these technologies I just went over, DHCP snooping, now I'm doing source guard. I may do dynamic ARC inspection, stuff like port security, all that kind of stuff. All that stuff is put into play when you don't have network access control. When you have network access control, you kind of don't need to do any of this. But that was a side quest. Let's get back to IP source guard and how that works. But this is generally just how IP source guard works. It cannot work without the DHCP snooping database. That is the key to all of this. If you don't have DHCP snooping on, you can't use source guard. You really can't use DIA or DAI or any of that good stuff. And this is kind of this is an access layer technology. You're not doing this just like DHCP snooping. You're not doing this at the collapse core or distribution layer. You're just not doing it there. You're always going to do it at the access layer. Same thing with DAI, same thing with port security. All that stuff is an access layer to keep people from getting into the first entry point into their network, which is the access layer of your network. If it's wireless, it's going to be at the AP and all that good stuff. So I hope that video was informative. This is just another technology that you can put in place if you do not have network access control to at least try to stop people from doing IP spoofing. Once again, DAI is MAC spoofing, so don't confuse the two. If you guys are out there or girls are out there getting ready to take your exam and they kind of try to trick you up by trying to tell you, oh, which one would you implement if you're trying to stop people from impersonating IP addresses? It's IP source guard. When you want to prevent MAC spoofing, it's DAI. But again, this is Don from Padlock Technologies. I hope this video was informative. Thank you and have a nice day.